Hey guys, Brad from Vintage Axe Revival. Um, I've been asked a lot about making a video beginning to end on how to polish an axe head. So it's Sunday. I have 4 axes that need polishing. 2 of them are vintage that need some grinding. 2 of them are silver foxes that need quite a bit of grinding and polishing. So I think what we're going to do today is my goal was originally to set out and do, 2 foxes and 1 vintage axe at the same time to try to kind of kill 3 birds with 1 stone type of thing. Because part of the process is changing grits on your palm sander, different steps in the process of the grinding, whether it be with a flap disc or be a conditioning pad, like a Brillo style pad. So originally that was my goal. I'm not sure if that's what I'm going to do yet or not, but for sure we are going to be polishing this little keen cutter. So it's going to require some pole repair on both sides. It's going to require some general smoothing of the whole thing because my customer wants this to be basically a mirror polish. So this is an opportunity for me to shoot that and film it for you and take you through it step by step. I'm going to do it in segments, so I'm going to piece the video together. This is just the first introduction part. So I'm going to go through a couple things that are required and needed, in my opinion, to do this right. So the first thing is the tools. Probably the most important tool is going to be what you do and what steps you take to prepare this head for the sanding stages for polishing. So you actually have to grind this surface smoother than it is to get a mirror polish. It all comes down to the surface you start with, okay? If I'm taking a brand new axe head, like a Flying Fox, for instance, that has a really rough surface on it. There's no way you're going to be able to polish that until you grind all that nice and flat and smooth. So an angle grinder, and then flap discs. I use 120 grit. I could go more coarse for faster stock removal. The issue that I find when you go to very coarse grits on a grinder is that it's going to leave deep scratches in the metal that you're going to need to work significantly harder to get rid of as you go into the polishing steps, okay? So I use flap discs, 120 grit. I use a flap disc that's angled like this, okay? Oh, actually, this is an 80 grit. Awesome. I just lied to you guys. No, actually, I do have some that are 120. Then I use, after that step, I use conditioning pads, okay? These are like Brillos. They're available in the blue, which is fine, the red, which is medium, and the brownish, that is coarse, okay? There are other types of discs out there that you could use. I've tried these things. I'm not really a fan. I might give them another try today. We'll see. After those steps, you have to go into the sanding stage, okay? I use a Festool ETS 125 5-inch random orbital sander, okay? The reason I use a Festool, and I have used DeWalt's, I've used Skill, I've used Black & Decker, I've used just about everything. I have found that the random orbital pattern that the sander has can have an effect on how well your product is polished. And I have found fewer swirls and what I call bite marks, where you get these little dots from the edges of the pad and things like that. Fewer of those with this sander than I have with others, okay? Now, the other thing is that the sanding discs that you use, I start sometimes with 80 grit, okay? I have a selection here of 80 grit, 220, 320, 400, 800 and 600, 1200, 1500, 2000, 2500, and 3000 grit. I don't skip any steps. Some people will tell you that you should double your grit every time. That's just not accurate when it comes to polishing. If I went from 80 to 160, 160 to 320, 320 to 600, and 600 to 1200, and 1200 to 2400, you're just not going to get the smoothness in stock removal that you need in each step. The important thing to remember is that the scratches that you make in the metal with 80 grit has to be removed at the 220 grit. The scratches you make in the metal at 220 have to be removed at 320, and vice, for 400 and 600 and 800. If there's ever any remnants of the damage, because you're essentially removing material and you're scratching away the surface, if there's ever any remaining scratches from that previous grit and you're just going higher and higher, they're never going to go away, okay? So I can't stress enough for you guys how important surface preparation to get yourself to a very smooth, even, consistent surface is before you start the sanding process, and how important removing any scratches that you've created with the lower grit as you progress to the next grit, how important that is. You have to spend the time with each grit to make sure that it's totally smooth and ready to go to the next one. If it requires you to use another 5-inch disc to get more bite with the same grit, do it. The other thing I was going to mention that is very important is that you use a eraser. This is just a thing you buy at the hardware store. It's for sanding erasers. So what it is it's rubber. You hold it against the sanding pad as it's spinning, and it will pull the metal residue and dust out of the sanding disc. So you got to use that, all right? The other thing that I want to point out is that you have to have a good quality buffer. I use the Jet 8 variable speed industrial buffer. One side I have my brush, my metal sanding brush, but then I have my polishing pad on this side. So you're going to use multiple grits of polishing and buffing compounds through the steps. Probably the most important step that most people skip is after you sand all the way to 3000 grit, you have to use a emery grit to reduce all of the small scratches on the metal from even the 3000 grit on your buffing wheel. Okay, this is called emery. This is black polishing compound, okay? The black polishing compound, I commit and use a specific buffing wheel for black. Why? Well, if you've got black compound on this thing and you think you're gonna go to white compound, which is the polishing compound, and you've got any black mixed in with it, it's not going to take you to the next level, okay? So committing a specific polishing wheel to the grit or color of jeweler's rouge or polishing compound you're going to be using is important. I have another one that I use for green. I have another one that I use for white. Okay. And then I have a soft cotton that I use for the final polishing. Now for this final polishing step, you could just use white, or you can use an extra fine honing paste, okay? So this is a super fine green compound paste that you can apply to the buffing pad, okay? It gives you a little bit more sheen, more three-dimensional, sorry about that, sheen than that white compound will. Now on the white compound, I'm giving a secret away here. Fabuluster, okay? It is not the same as white compound. It is a white compound, but I have found that for high carbon steel, this gives you the best luster and depth, okay? All of these things are available on Amazon, all right? So, the first step in the process is obviously surface prep and grinding, okay? So, we're 12 minutes and 27 seconds into this already, and I haven't even started doing any work. So, I also want to stress to you a couple things about safety. So, I polish on this jet polishing buffing wheel up to 3,200 RPM. If you have a razor sharp axe in your hand and you don't know what you're doing, and you stick that axe head into that polishing wheel at the wrong angle, and it flips up, and it sticks you in the forehead, and you're dying, you're dead, that's your fault. I start out around 1,800 RPM to do the primary polishing, whether it be with the black emery rouge, if I decide to do green rouge. With white, I do 1,800, but then I skip all the way to 2,200 or 3,200 to do final polishing. The key is also how much pressure you apply the axe head to the polishing wheel while you're polishing. It would make sense that less pressure would give you finer polishing, right? But if you haven't taken the time to really put some power into it and some pressure into it to remove the stock you need to get the polish you want, going light's not going to do you any good. So my final stage of polishing is a very light pressure on whether it be the yellow treated cotton discs or it be the white, really soft, fluffy cotton disc. You absolutely need to be super careful. If you are working with a polisher, what you have to remember about a polisher is a polisher spins clockwise, okay? I'm looking at my polisher, and this is a polisher, not a grinder, okay? See, it says industrial buffer. The difference being this has a rotation down and towards me. A grinder will have a rotation up and away from you. If you take your grinder and you put a buffing wheel on it, and it's where you can get to the buttons on the front of the buffer and you push the button, that wheel is coming up and away from you. If you go stick the sharp end of an axe head in that, it's gonna flip up and it's gonna fly out of your hands and it could really hurt somebody and do damage to your garage, your building, your car, whatever you have in the neighborhood, okay? So there's a difference between a buffer and a grinder. That's why I have a buffer, all right? I love this jet variable speed industrial buffer. It's been an absolute bulletproof digital speed control starting at 900, going all the way to 3200, okay? So that's safety number one. Safety number two is taking care of your lungs and your face and your eyes and everything else. But your lungs are super important. The first year I was doing this type of work, I was very negligent on not wearing protective gear. I wore these when I was grinding, but I thought because I'm using this fancy jet dust collection system that I didn't really need to wear any other protection while I was polishing and or even using the buffing wheel. That's totally wrong. I developed a cough that I could not get rid of. I finally decided to bite the bullet and invest in a really high quality respirator. Something that I would be willing to wear, okay? This is a forced air ventilator with protective screen that I just put on like a helmet, push a button. It has an electric motor in it that powers air down in front of my face so it doesn't fog up. It works great for people who wear glasses, and it works great for people with beards. Okay, and I can't stress it enough. It's made by Trend. It's called the Pro Air. The filters are kind of expensive, but I got 6 months of use out of a set of filters, and I just vacuumed them a couple times, and that worked really well. So, taking care of your lungs, protecting your eyes, and taking care of your hands also is going to be the next thing. I sharpen all of my axes before I do the final polishing stages, and then I go back and I do the 800 or 1000 grit sanding on to sharpen the axe head again, and then I use a leather strop. My axes are razor sharp. They'll shave hair off your arms. I go to 1000 grit and then a strop. But because the polishing stage actually will dull the axe head, believe it or not. But when I'm messing around with an axe head on the buffer, I am messing around with something that's pretty much razor sharp. Therefore, it is ultra important that you guys wear, in my opinion, a level 5 cut resistant glove, okay? These are available again on Amazon. Some of them have electromagnetic fingertips so you can use your phone. Some of them don't, and I cut just the index finger end off. Some of you know about the time when I stuck my hand into my bandsaw a few months ago. This is the glove, all right? I stuck my hand into my bandsaw when it was running because I couldn't hear it running because I was wearing ear protection. I was reaching through it to grab something and I got too close to the blade. And now, with force, I jammed my hand into a bandsaw. I cut my index finger. Without that glove, I probably would have cut my finger off. Instead, I cut some soft tissue, I had stitches, and I have a little bit of nerve damage. But it's important. The other thing that I'm going to talk about real quickly is going to be ear protection. One of the best products I have found for the money when it comes to blocking sound is going to be these 3M Bluetooth ear protectors. They sell them at your hardware stores, okay, Menards. Right now, I'm wearing a Bluetooth ear protection that is also available on Amazon. So there's different ones that you can get, okay? Some really nice one out there that are custom moldable that are really cool. So take care of your ears, take care of your eyes, take care of your lungs. If you think that you can go out and grind metal for a couple hours and not affect your breathing, you're wrong. Go blow your nose when you're done. It's going to be black. That black doesn't stop at your nose. It goes all the way down into your sinuses and into your lungs and everything else. So this is a cough that I'm getting over some influenza from 3 weeks ago. So anyway, guys, that is a 20-minute intro to what will be a pretty long-ass video. But I wanted to go over some of these specifics with you so you know what I do and how I do it. First step, surface prep grinding, conditioning pad. Second step, sanding, 80 or 120 grit, all the way up to 3,000 grit. Third step, polishing. But don't forget about the emery stage. Emery polishing compound bites and removes a certain amount of scratches. Those little tiny light scratches that you see even after 3,000 grit, the emery helps reduce those, dull them down a little bit. Lighting, super important, guys. I use, in my shop, these are Jeep light bars. These are super bright, very bright. You know, I mean, I see every little imperfection. If it looks good under these lights, it'll look fantastic under normal light. So I can't stress enough how important lighting is so that you can see the imperfections that you're trying to get rid of, okay? So I run these off of a 120 volt, 12 volt converter that's fan cooled. Bought that on Amazon too. They're cheap. Well, not relatively cheap, all right? And I do that also because I'm limited on how much amperage I have available in my workspace for running all my power tools. If I was trying to run this much light off of 110, I would be drawing too much amperage and I would be popping breakers all the time. So these are kind of a cool idea, I think, personally, these light bars. They're very bright, they're LED, they give you a nice, bright, white light. And then this is the Pyramid. I don't know if you guys can see this. Pyramid PSV 300 switched DC power supply. All right, that's running all my lights. And I put them on a light switch, a regular old residential light switch. So, all right, guys, 23 minutes, 45 seconds of introduction. That's pretty stupid, but you wanted it, so here we go. I'll check in with you in a little bit.